Welcome to the Brain Network podcast.
Did you forget the name of this podcast, Michael?
I may have. That may be what that pause was. I was
Hello, everyone.
Thinking about what we're going to talk about, and there's just so many different words running through my mind, and
Sure,
I was
babes.
like,
Sure.
I wanted to say them all at once, and then I was like, wait, I better say the right word. So we have the return of the podcast resident bogan, Jade Wright, and we have the return of Ricki Spencer, who is so many things. It's unbelievable. So much work done in the disability advocacy space, been a part of the Royal Commission into Disability, and I'm going to read this so I get it right. Co-convener of Accessible Greens Victoria, amongst, as I've mentioned, so many other things in disability advocacy. We have both of you here to talk about the disability support pension, DSP. So I'll start with Ricki, and I want to ask this to both of you. What was the process like getting on the DSP? And maybe Ricki, you can explain what it is, just to give us a little primer.
Sure. So with the disability support pension, it's a payment that's designed for people who don't have a capacity to work more than the number of hours that's designated by the I can't remember the act, but the legislation. At the time, I applied for it back in 2011. So I think I was just at the cusp of change. But what had happened is I'd spent over 25 years in social work roles. So I worked in child protection through to actually at Centrelink for about 6-7 years. And part of that process is that I just, I had a lot of mental health conditions diagnosed at that stage with what they thought was bipolar, chronic anxiety and depression, and I think it was post-traumatic stress disorder. So it was a combination of conditions, all of which accumulated to where I had a complete and utter, don't like the word to say breakdown, but I would just say that my body and my mind were no longer in sync. And I then had I couldn't work. I could not physically. The thought of trying to get myself to work was just, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't shower. I could barely go to the toilet. It was just so debilitating. My house was just a total mess. It was a horrible feeling, and very trigger self-harm and suicide ideation was sort of part of that. So I went, and I said, and I was mortgaged. So I had a lot of cards. So I thought, what am I going to do? And, I feared that. I thought, what am I going to do? This hard time, new start. And then I applied and I explained my situation. The phone, I was crying, and they seemed okay over the phone. They said, just, put your forms in and we'll see what we can do. And I remembered that I was laying on the couch when I was living there, and I remember getting the forms, and it said afterwards that, no, you didn't qualify, which I didn't understand, because I was told by doctors I couldn't work ever again at that stage with all my conditions, as I'd been hospitalised in the psychiatric ward quite a few times. Anyhow, according to Centrelink, the girl, the person that they said, this is, that's the reality, you got to work. So I was just devastated. I was in tears, and I remember I said, can I speak to a social worker? Thinking myself, no, this person's heart to heart, and at that stage, they still had them. It took, I think, a day or two to get onto it. And because I didn't know I was going to become homeless, because wasn't believed. I was believed by the psychiatric profession, but not by the administrative session. So going on to that, it was an absolute nightmare. But it took a while. And then when I spoke to the psychiatrist, to social worker, explained my condition, begged him, I said, I want to work. I just cannot. The thought of it physically, I explained my roles. I did. And I worked in complex work with traumatized young people. I'd seen some things that other people would never see, but I had to live through it. So finally I got onto it, but it was such a traumatic experience of not sleeping. And the worst part of it for me was having somebody on the phone so blatantly flippant, not caring that here is this person. This was before I was open about being transgender, just saying to me, you know, get over it. You've got your forms. You're going to be paid new start. I suggest you start looking for work because it's not going to happen for you. So when someone says those sorts of language, and I was at my lowest, I thought, where do I go? And this was just at that time, and I'm sorry for taking a lot of time. This was a time when documents were disappearing. So that they were moving that whole model of not coming in to get stuff all on the phone. So I had to wait.
Okay.
I had to wait. I remember it was 2 hours on the phone. And these were the days before we still had handsets in those days.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd be on the phone and you would pray to God that they would not cut you off because you had to be, and you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't walk around. So even going to the toilet, you had to somehow drag the phone because if you missed that call, they would hang up and there's no record. So we're tied. So that anxiety driven, and then to prove your identity, you know, and if when you're in pain, your physical pain and mental pain, it's sometimes hard to be focused and you don't get sympathy. So that's my story. At that time, at 2011, it was very traumatic.
Wow. That's so you have so much on your plate with the struggles that you're going through, and then just getting access to this stuff is traumatic, and going through the system is this anxiety inducing process that kind of sounds like it's just not designed well at all, but obviously like it's kind of like designed to make the situation worse. It's just not designed to do anything beneficial for you at all. It's just to wrap your head around what you would have been going through in the lead up to that, and then just the negative impact of engaging with that system is.
I would just like to add, Michael and Jade, when I worked at that organisation, and this is maybe 20 years ago, there used to, I don't know if you heard, there used to be a system where people would actually go to your homes. And that wasn't done often, but if you were that unwell and help with the forms and that went away. And I thought that was what's missing in these systems, the care of looking after human beings with dignity. Absolutely. And when you make somebody wait on a phone for hours on end, on a mobile, you have to have a charge, you know, and then just think, oh, well, and then they send you that message to say, you know, if you are rude or that you will be the call will be terminated. So you have no way, you're at the mercy of that caller. And to have to wait for like 2 hours, and I've had friends now that have had to wait 3 hours, and then they wait and then they get told, well, you need this form, you need that from your doctor. And I keep saying to my friends, it's like, you know, nobody cares. Like it costs money. It's time, and doctors' time. Doctors sometimes get annoyed. They said, you know, we can't do it, you know, but I'll stop there. But as I want to hear Jade's story, but it just annoys me that the system is not, it's designed to make you jump, and it's really based on ableism principles, which is that, you know, you have to somehow almost provide a performance in order to qualify for this. And if, God forbid, you're that unwell to voice, or you don't have advocacy, you are likely to miss out. And this is why I want to fight today to point out to all the people and friends I know who gave up on the disability. They should have, because of the trauma experience of going from that process. And they're now living in sheltered homes, on the streets, on dire situations, which is just not acceptable.
No, I completely agree with you that I do think this is quite a performance to get on the DSP. I personally, I can relate so much to your story, your story of like psychiatric care and things. I've had quite a bit of a roller coaster with that myself, and it was my most recent hospitalization that they sort of said, Jade, look, you're really struggling at this point. you probably need to go on the DSP. And I said, well, where do I even begin? And so thankfully, the people in the hospital helped me, and they wrote this like 4-page document of what it's like to be at my absolute worst, which was a joy to read, let me tell you. And I remember one of my other friends, she had tried to get on the DSP before, and because she's very much a people pleaser, when they rang her the second time for that interview to sort of assess things, she said, oh no, everything's fine. No, I can mostly do whatever. It's fine. And then she didn't get the DSP. So I was scared into this performance of, this is my worst day, and my worst day is my everyday, basically.
Yeah.
And this, I remember the psychologist or the therapist or whoever it was that was doing this assessment. I said, she said to me, she sort of distilled it all down. I poured my heart out over the phone for about 5-6 minutes, and she distills it down to, so you basically can't do anything without your mum. And at 24, trying to, like, I had a full-time job at the time, like prior to this, and I really tried, and I absolutely given my all to being a functioning human in society. And this woman tells me that I can't, and it stings. Oh, it stings so hard. Even now, I'm kind of getting emotional, but it's I can really empathize with people that didn't have that support, though, because I absolutely couldn't have written that 4-page document on all the time. Even to remember the times that I've been in hospital and the dates and all of those things that you needed to have. It's just, it's absurd.
And it's put on to us to kind of put it together, that narrative. And it's almost, I don't understand. It's like, in those how does one get all that information in a chronological sense when your whole world is so embattered with pain, and that, and we're kind of thinking, how are we going to get on, because the fear of being made to look for work when your body cannot just get you there, and it's just that incredible feeling of fear, and that performance is like, they want you to relive that trauma as validation that you are almost at the breaking point before you would even qualify, for this support.
And originally I didn't even qualify. I qualified for like the job seeker payment, but with a no mandated looking for work. It was a really strange, like, they still wanted me to be on job seeker and stuff. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, why won't you give me the extra $10, I think it was, to, exist? Crazy.
You've both spoken to something that's probably very unacknowledged, the power differential and the power dynamic between the person on the other end of the phone and yourselves, both the way you spoke about how it changes you psychologically, and the lack of humanity that they bring to the table when they're discussing these things with you. And also that sort of like Kafkaesque bureaucratic stuff going on, where you've got to talk in the particular way that they want you to talk, and the system is not designed to meet you where you are, but you have to put on this display. And then not only that, but I mean, we talk about this with the NDIS as well, like when you're talking about you need the support for you at your worst, and then just bringing that up can be traumatic in itself. And it's that whole, how do you navigate that when you have a variable state, which everybody does. Everyone with a disability has different needs at different times, and we need the support when we're at our worst, so to speak. And we can't just, we can't have something that's halfway. We can't have something for when we're at that meeting and we're presenting well because we've made some sort of accommodation to be at that meeting, or whatever the case may be. I want to jump into what it's like day to day for both of you to use. That's a very
very Queensland of you.
Okay, let's go with that. It's very, very Queens. I was thinking of a worse word. Both of you, day-to-day living on the DSP, what's happening in that space? I'll start with Ricki.
For me, it's like, how am I going to get through the day? Just lately, I have not been able to sleep at night at all. Lucky I get 3 hours sleep in the day now. For me, it's like I go to bed, I lay down, and then all of a sudden I feel cold, I feel hot. My body and my brain don't seem to be connected. And I don't know if it's the medication, but it's like my whole day recycles around my medications, taking them in the day and in the evening, and the pain medication to mediate that. And so with that in my mind and the dizziness, and then I try and think, okay, what bills do I need to pay? When is the rent due? Because that's my fear. I always have this dream that I've missed out paying my rent and that I'll be on the street. So, and because I have 5 cats, which people probably think, well, how dare she have 5 cats? Well, they're my family, you know, and that I would go without so that they have food. And for me, for somebody who's part of the LGBTIQ community, who's trans, I have no family, and that dissolved, you know, many years, but 8 years ago, there's nothing. It just divorced completely. So when you're on your own, you have to really be resilient in terms of thinking, work my pay. So my whole day revolves, do my cats have enough to eat? Then it's my last thing about food. I have to have enough for my medications. And then I think, what can I eat that's cheap, that can be within the means? And then obviously I look at when my electricity is due to see if I need to, you know, see if I have to extend things or get for hardship stuff that you can get that subsidy. So I have to plan all these things. Then it's my advocacy work, which I love and keeps me going, which is my voluntary work and my study. And it's just a daily routine of, you know, I'm alive, so I'm blessed for that. But, you know, for me, it's if I can just get through without having to use the toilet more than 3 times, I'm happy. And if I can shower, I'm even more happier. And yeah, it's just, you know, and I try and make my life as comfortable, but I have to make sure I'm always within my means. I mean, they keep saying to me, you know, your breathing is, you know, you're at the risk of having a heart attack because you have sleep apnea. And I said, I don't have the funds to get that. And I have to wait. You know, NDIS is a long process of getting forms. And because I have memory loss as well, by the time I start an application, I forget to, you know, so it's like, it's really draining. And it's just, look, I'm happy that I'm alive, and I'm happy I've got my cats to keep me company, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm sort of hearing from your story, Ricki, is that there's this very short-term focus, just making it through the next day, bare bones stuff. No ability to think and plan for the future, which is,
Michael, I'm just frightened that I have enough to pay my rent and that the landlord doesn't say, we're going to sell the house on you. Because, you know, one, where do I go? Where does a trans person in the mid-50s who has no job prospects, who's chronically unwell, where do they go? When I used to crawl from my stairs when I was living in my flats in Footscray because I could not walk anymore the stairs. So my fear is being, you know, where do I go and can I afford it? So my whole day, you know, this is how I feel.
Yeah, I think it's quite a part of it is what am I trying to say? I think mindfulness is an important tool in happiness, but I think too, calling it a strategy when every moment is your life and thinking ahead of that is just not possible when you're living in basically poverty. yeah, it makes me sick to my stomach. I can absolutely empathize with having your cats as your family. That really strikes a chord with me, and I think it would strike a chord with a lot of listeners because so many people, especially during COVID, adopted a lot of animals and really, hopefully, embrace their families a lot more. I know I have. I live with my mom at the moment in my childhood bedroom, and I live in a regional town in Queensland, and there's one bus that does one route once an hour. So a car is necessary if you want to get anywhere, basically. And of course, those are exponentially expensive. So the thought of maybe one day living in that car hasn't, like, I think about that probably once or twice a day, and what I would do if that were to become a reality. And it's a confronting thing to talk about and to think about, but I'm just grateful that I actually have the car because, goodness gracious, where would you go otherwise?
Yeah, yeah. And it's such an important point that you've made, Jade, about living in regional Australia that isn't addressed often when we talk about these issues, because many of the people that are talking about this stuff live in cities and don't have that perspective.
Yeah, I'm not on the NDIS at the moment either. I think it's a lot easier. I think if you have approval from the NDIS, a lot of the issues that come from being in regional towns kind of dissipate, that you get a lot of funding because you're in a regional situation. But going through that whole lot of paperwork a second time for the same thing, especially if you've got like memory loss or something like Ricki does, it's
yeah.
crazy.
So I can imagine the changes that we want to see. This is a question I asked everyone about their thing that I talked to them about. We want to challenge these power dynamics in these relationships that we have with these services and authorities and stuff. But what is happening in the space of turning this around, and what can people do to contribute? And Ricki, maybe you can talk about the Royal Commission a bit, and maybe what the Greens is doing in Victoria.
And I'll probably also mention with my doctorate work in disruption theory, which really tackles ableism at the head cornerstone of change. But going back to the Royal Commission, it was challenging because it's the first time in my life that I spoke to people whom I didn't know about the most shamed thing that I felt for a long time. Because when you disclose to people you don't know that you're not coping in terms of trying to make the ends meet, and when you actually verbalize that, if you count for every second, every cent, like every tablet is $6.60. And I remember saying to them that there was 2 months during the COVID when my hormone replacement therapy that I needed to take to firm wasn't available. They had run out. And the only medication I could get was not on the PBS. So I had to get it because otherwise your body starts to, it's hard. Yeah. And that was $65 for, I think it's a fortnight. So I thought, okay, well, I guess I have to, and it was just like thinking, well, things will just have to be put aside and not eat. And luckily I had stuff in the cupboard, like flour and stuff that I could buy. But I remembered thinking, I've got no one, I've got no family. What am I going to do? And it's like, I explained that, where do you go? I've tried to look for work, and I think I've said that before in previous places that, I was trained as a teacher, and then I applied for over 40 positions, but no school will hire me because I'm transgender. And they've said to me that, we don't feel we can accommodate you And I thought, I didn't know what, and I thought because I have a stick, I can't walk far upstairs, I suppose. And then I thought, well, I'm a risk. They said I'm a risk. So I don't know if I'm a risk to students or that they're a risk to me. It was not made clear. So when you're advised that, so you think, well, where's my life? Where's my future? Where do I go? Is it better if I just not be here? So I said at the Royal Commission that there needs to be better support for people that don't feel, we just need a bit more money, the pension, to help us through, all services, to make, a payment that's universal, that every person who cannot get employment can do it, change the whole economical structure of how we support people and care for people. That's not, and that's the one of the concerns that was raised, to say, how much do we have to explain that when we're living on old food and stuff, because that's all we can afford. And when people talk about, and I said that people talked about toilet paper that time, COVID, and I said to them, do you know what? I said, do you know how much toilet paper costs? And I said, well, it costs about for $4, for so many rolls. Now, if you have stomach problems, you could probably go through about 6 rolls in that one day. And there's only so much you can afford to buy before you can no longer afford toilet paper.
Yeah.
So then you've got to work out another system of cleaning yourself. And when you talk about this, I was teary because I was shamed, stigma that, look at me, where I've come from, where I've had things, and all of a sudden I don't. So that was the Royal Commission, was truth telling, that, there's a myth out there that people used to think that, oh, everyone with disability is rotting. They've all got 3 jobs. They've all got homes. They've all got multiple cars. And that's just further than the truth. So at all my workspaces is a disability focus within the Victorian Greens, Accessible Greens Victoria. We're looking at making spaces more accessible to support more people living with disabilities to become into roles of politics and governance, so that they can kind of really unpack policies and make them more inclusive. And the reality checks, because government says one thing, and the so-called people with portfolios, unless you have a lived experience of a condition, whether it would be mental illness, a physical condition, a tumours, cancer, you don't know, unless you've been into that situation where you don't have access to funds or your means of resources to qualify your life so it has some sense of meaning. You're at the mercy of support services. And you're just another person wanting a service. And as you get older, you become more invisible because, you're the priority, so you don't fit in. So that's stability. It's that unknown, like that time, I call it the time waiting. I'm waiting for that letter. I'm waiting for that SMS to say, you are going to be reviewed by our doctors. And then all of a sudden, my whole life becomes again in limbo, and I have anxiety. And it's like, oh my God, where, because your fear is, I've got things. How do I start again? And it's like that unknown is the biggest fear for many of us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I personally have a lot of anxiety disorders, and the main culprit in my not being able to work is something called conversion disorder, which is kind of like Tourette's. When I get really anxious, I'll have it almost looks like a seizure. So it's kind of the best for me and the people around me. Like, I was in a customer service role that I'm not working because it can be quite traumatic to watch. And where was I going with this? Oh, yes. A lot of times, especially if I go to the hospital or something and I'm having an attack, it'll get passed off as just anxiety. It's just this, it's just that. And I think it's very easy, especially with an invisible disability, or trying to describe your pain to someone who has only ever stubbed their toe maybe 3 times. It's a very difficult task, and trying to build a bridge across that and gain some sort of empathy and understanding is just beyond a lot of people's care, really.
And that's sort of what it kind of gets to me to think is, how do we change that notion of just, or people categorizing us? And that's why I've been writing now in this space for coming up to 12 months, and what I call it's called my 3 dilemmas for identity. And it's from a theory by Gurwitz and Cribbs in 2008. They were social psychologists looking at what is it when it comes to identity, and how does it be framed in terms of social settings. So how do other people perceive people in a group? So my interest is, how do other people, abled people, see and interact with people who are labelled disabled or are living with an invisible disability? And there's 3 things that we look at change which to me is important to everyone listening, is how do we do this? How do we notice it? How do you look at it in your workspace or school? And the first thing is, are people around you or the spaces are just categorizing? So they're saying, you have this condition, you have that condition, instead of engaging with the full complexity of disability. And with that, I mean understanding the lived, the invisible aspects, the parts that the public and the private sphere of disability, what that involves. Because so many times in reports and policies, there's a big focus on, or this and Centrelink, or what it's called Services Australia, has been doing this for the last 20, 30 years. They've moved away from the full complexity side to really focus and quantify in a business model, looking at categories. So everything is categorized. Everything is measured by a impairment table and given quantified numbers in terms of ratings. And this is very problematic for people like ourselves, whose conditions are individualized. We're not robots. We're not Pavlov's dogs that respond to stimulus and responses. Our brains are all differently wired, our own unique responses to different things. So we have to look at, whenever you see categories of something, that straight away, that's not right. So realizing that that's what's taking place. The second is, they recognize identities. Yes, there are people who've got this illness, or this people can work a couple hours. That's a start. But what they should be doing, or what we should be doing, is problematizing it and disrupting them. Why is it that we're categorizing it? Why are we recognizing identities? Why is it that we're not hearing the voice? Whose voices are we being heard by? Is it from white privileged males? Is it from people who have limited understanding of what the body can do, and how it can, in your brain and mind, cannot be connected, and what that does when your brain and your physical bodies don't align and you can't do the things you think you can do? We need to unpack that. And the third most important that we need to be thinking about is, most people say, let's living with it. You've got to live with the condition. You've got to adapt. You've got to fix the bridge that's part broken. But I say, no, let's challenge that hierarchy in power. Why do we have to always repair? Why are we always the repaired others? Why can't we just start again fresh, build a whole new system of a universal payment that can allow us to live comfortably, to feed ourselves, to house ourselves? We have enough resources in the rich OECD countries that can do it, but we choose not to. And that's the problem. It's making us compete amongst our other people within the community for resources, and that's not fair. We should be challenging the hierarchy and challenging the power, and not always repairing the bridge. We are not pieces to be mended. We are whole people. We just have a different lived experience. And that's how I personally believe that we need to move forward in terms of challenging ableism, by really deconstructing what has been constructed over the last 40 to 60 years when it comes to the social security system in Australia.
Absolutely. We continually disenfranchising the voices of disabled people and so many other marginalized groups, and like you say, pitting them against each other. I think you summarized it beautifully. What can ordinary people do on a practical level? Obviously, we need to do that deconstruction and challenge narratives and challenge our biases in ourselves and in the systems that we're operating in. What can we do on a political front, on a social front, practically, to bring about change?
Well, for me, there's a couple quickly. One is to get involved in your local politics spaces. Ask questions. Elections are coming up, so I will be suggesting to people, whichever political affiliation you are associated with, if you have one, ask the questions of your local candidates. Go ask them, hi, I'm somebody who's living with an invisible disability. What are your policies at the moment in terms of support? Do you have a policy statement in relation to NDIS, disability support pension, housing affordability for people living with disabilities, carer support pension, access to hospital and dental care? These are a list of questions that we need to kind of ask. And I think perhaps next time we can talk more with Michael about having a list of things that you can ask the question or email your local representative. Now, you may know that I'm part of the Accessible Greens Victoria, which was previously known as the People Living with Disabilities Working Group. That is a space you're welcome to join up as a member. And if you are a carer, an ally, you have an interest in this area, we welcome more new members. And it's just to have a listen to what you can do in terms of change, how you can address it from a micro level and it becomes to a macro level. It all has to start from one space. But most importantly, it's connecting as a community. Reach out to all of us. Happy to leave my details on. Connect, have a conversation. Let's start a movement going. Let's all work together, create a statement. The politics in the country at the moment is merging for an election happening early next year. This is the best time as a community of shared experience of people living with a disability, their carers and allies, that we can put forward a list of criteria that we want answered by all the elected people who want to run for governance. How are you going to support us? And the other big question is, if you are somebody with a disability, maybe put your hand up, because there's many of us that would support you in helping you get to that area, especially with your local politics spaces. If you are aligned socially and politically with a particular party, get involved and put disability back where it should be, which is everybody's business. Let's destroy ableism once and for all and show the community, whether you have a different modality of thinking or whether you have a different way of connecting with your environment, you still have a place and you have a right and a say into how things of resources should be distributed.
I'll definitely put some links in the description about Accessible Greens Victoria, if people want to get involved in that, and I'll definitely be happy to have another chat down the track of getting more into the weeds of the political space. There's certainly quite a few people in the community that could weigh in on that, and I think it's so important the way you've put it. No matter what political affiliation anyone may have, we can ask these questions about what's happening in the disability sector to anybody. And I think these conversations are so important because I'm very passionate about disability advocacy, but I'm not on the DSP, for example, so I can't speak to the issues that are going on there from a lived experience. So I need to listen to your stories, and it's been great to have you share them. And just to bring it home, Jade, can you weigh
No
in
pressure.
on, yeah, no pressure at all. Can you weigh in on changes that you want to see in the system from your lived experience that's happening in the DSP and I guess more broadly, because the DSP is kind of one of those core modules of how we support this community. What changes do you want to see? What things do you want people to know that they can do?
Well, I'm not quite as politically minded as Ricki, so I don't have all of these resources. But I think with Christmas coming up and everyone getting together with their family, I think it's very important that we all kind of have these conversations, because you'll listen to the people that are mostly aligned with your opinions, but slightly off, right? And if I go up to someone and start spouting all of these things that are completely against their views, then of course they're going to shut off. They're going to wall off and not listen. But if you have a lot in common, if you have that common ground, you can chip away at some assumptions that other people have. And I think it's a very poignant time of year in which to do so.
That's such a powerful point to end on. So I want to thank you both for sharing your stories and educating me on so many different things about what's happening in the community.
Thanks for having me.
And we will continue this conversation in the future. I think there's more to be said in this space. So thank you both so much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
See you, Michael.
Bye.